The Butler family log cabin was originally constructed back in 1860 near the banks of Mackey's Creek, a tributary of the Tombigbee River. In 1977, with the development of the Tennessee Tombigbee Waterway, it was discovered that the old cabin site would become covered by water. The Army Corps of Engineers put a plan in motion to save this irreplaceable monument from the past. With a suitable spot selected, work crews cleared trees and did some minor excavation to prepare for the foundation. Foundation work began by digging a series of holes into which steel reinforcing rod was inserted. The logs of the Butler home have been hewn. That is, their sides have been made square or flat through the use of special hand tools. The log is first scored with a series of vertical cuts, then a broad axe is used to remove the large chunks. The slick is like a large chisel. It further flattens the surface of the log, removing any traces of the vertical cuts. The finishing touch is done with another special tool called an adze. Its curved handle and head are specifically designed for just this purpose. The first layer of logs is called the mud sill. These support the floor joists known as sleepers. In early times, these were often placed directly on the ground, making them extremely susceptible to rotten termites. The time had come to begin the raising and the stacking of the walls. As each row was set upon the next, care was taken to keep the corners in line. The notches at the ends of the logs are known as half dovetails. The sloped surface carries water away to prevent premature rot. The structure is actually two cabins linked together by an open center section known as the dog trot or possum trot. The logs in each room or pen were erected in pairs. First one was put up, then its mate on the opposite wall. Then the crew moved to the adjacent wall, adding the next two logs. Layer by layer, the walls grew higher. For the upper logs, the crew brought in a touch of the modern way. A forklift was used to raise the huge long logs that stretched across the top. Pioneers used greased skid poles that were leaned against the side of the building on the outside. Ropes were thrown over the wall and used to hoist the logs into place. The top logs, known as the plates, were tied together with wooden pegs. The pegs were hand-carved, then pounded into holes drilled at the corners. The original rafters were dry and very brittle. It was decided that the best plan would be to replace them. Pine poles were acquired from a nearby area that had recently been logged. These were peeled using draw knives, then placed in a jig and cut to length. With all the prep work done, the ridge pole was raised and the rafters nailed into place. Now the porches could be added on. Small white oak logs were made into the sleepers. Pine poles would hold up the porch roof. A few ceiling joists were added, and finally the rafters. At the high end, each porch rafter sat directly on top of its mate coming down from the main roof. Sheathing the roof was the next order of business. Early settlers often used unedged boards, eliminating two saw cuts, saving time and money. In the old days, shingles or shakes were made by hand from wood through a long, delicate process. Big logs were first cut into blocks, quartered with an axe, then each piece split again and again. While the shakes were being laid, the masons were also getting started on the chimneys. Excavation by archaeologists back at the original site revealed that brick, not rock, was used in the building of the first chimneys. Their more uniform shape made bricks less labor-intensive to move and install. Several very old homes that still stand in the surrounding countryside gave further evidence that brick was widely used as the building material of choice by the early masons. With the chimneys finished, the final shakes could be nailed down. The shakes are made from white oak, which possesses a natural component known as tylosis. Tylosis works as a sealant which fills the pores of the wood to protect it from the penetration of moisture, inhibiting the growth of mold and moss. All that was left to be done were the last few details. the cabin was starting to take shape. 4 of the original doors and hinges were still intact. A 5th was put together using leftover materials that remained from the old cabin. You will note that there are only 2 windows and that each is next to a fireplace. Research indicates that these serve primarily as a way to bring in firewood. Generally, pieces of wood and even small flat rocks served as the filler or chink in the cracks. Today, styrofoam is used for its insulating properties. Folks back then covered or daubed the cracks with mud. Frequently in southern climates, the chinking was knocked out in the spring to let air circulate. When the cool weather returned, it was the children's job to refill the spaces. As the mud dried and cracked, it had to be patched and required constant maintenance. Modern chink expands and contracts with changing temperatures and forms a permanent seal. The beauty and strength of the old logs stand as a testimonial to the spirit and determination of our forefathers. Perhaps they will serve as an inspiration to our future, that generations in yet another 100 years may look back and gain some insight and understanding from the grandeur and simplicity of these old walls.